I buried the wrong woman. Now someone else will take her place. And this time, I'm ready.
The phone rang at 4:17 in the morning, which is never good news, unless you're expecting a lottery win or your mother-in-law finally kicked the bucket. Since I hadn't bought a ticket and Edith was still breathing fire somewhere in Parma, I knew this wasn't my lucky day. "Mr. Mallory, this is Cleveland General. Your wife is giving birth." I sat up in my empty bed, staring at the rain streaking down my bedroom window. The steel mill's night shift whistle was still echoing across the flats, and my brain was trying to process what the nurse just said. "Lady, my wife died 2 years ago. Car accident on Route 2. I was at the funeral. Honestly, I paid for the casket." Slamming, then, "Sir, Melanie Mallory is in delivery room 3. She's asking for you." Shimmer, my hands started shaking. Not the good kind of shaking you get when you're about to win big at poker. The kind that happens when your dead wife apparently decides to resurrect herself and pop out babies like some twisted Easter miracle. "I'll be right there," I said. Because what else do you say when your supposedly deceased spouse is having someone else's kid? 20 minutes later, I was standing in the fluorescent chaos of Cleveland General's maternity ward, wearing yesterday's jeans and a Steelers jersey that smelled like motor oil and broken dreams. The nurse who'd called me was a thick-built woman with kind eyes and the patience of someone who'd seen every variety of family drama. "Room 307, she said, pointing down a hallway that stretched longer than my list of regrets. I walked like a man heading to his own execution, which wasn't far from the truth. Each step echoed off the linoleum, mixing with the sounds of new life being born and old lives falling apart. When I reached the door, I could hear a woman's voice inside, tired but familiar. Too familiar. I pushed open the door and saw her. Same dark hair, same green eyes, same face that used to smile at me over morning coffee before the world went to heck. She was holding a baby, looking exhausted and beautiful, and very much not dead. "Hello, Vincent," she said, like we just bumped into each other at the grocery store, instead of her rising from the grave. "Mel?" My voice cracked like I was 13 again. She shook her head. "I'm Lucy, Mel's twin sister." The room started spinning. I grabbed the doorframe to keep from falling over, which would have been embarrassing even by my standards. Lucy, the sister Mel mentioned exactly twice in 15 years of marriage. The one who lived in Portland and worked with computers and never visited. "Where's Mel?" I asked. Lucy looked down at the baby, a tiny thing with wrinkled red skin and the general appearance of an angry raisin. "Norway. She's been there for 2 years. Working at some research facility. She couldn't come back because everyone thinks she's dead. Because she is dead. I saw the body. I identified her at the morgue." Restless. "You saw me," Lucy said quietly. "I was in the car that night. Mel was supposed to be driving, but we switched at the last minute. She had some emergency at the hospital with her boss, Dr. Pruitt." Presumption. Dr. Alex Pruitt. I remembered him from the hospital Christmas parties. Tall, silver-haired, the kind of guy who wore expensive suits and talked about his golf handicap. The kind of guy who made me feel like a grease monkey in a tuxedo. "So you let me bury an empty casket while my wife ran off to play scientist in Norway?" Restless, shifted the baby to her other arm. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. The accident was real. I was hurt bad, unconscious for days. When I woke up, Mel was already gone, and everyone thought I was her. The paperwork was filed, the insurance paid out. By the time I could think straight, it was too late to fix it without destroying her new life." Windshield. "What about destroying mine?" She didn't have an answer for that, which told me everything I needed to know about where I ranked in this family's priorities. The baby started crying, a sound like a smoke alarm with abandonment issues. Lucy rocked it gently, making soft shushing noises that reminded me of how Mel used to calm me down after my nightmares about the mill accident. "Whose kid is that?" I asked, though I was pretty sure I didn't want to know. "Dr. Pruitt's." Dismantle. There it was, the final nail in the coffin of my marriage. delivered by a woman who looked exactly like my dead wife, but wasn't her. The universe had a sense of humor, darker than a coal mine at midnight. So let me get this straight, I said, sitting down in the visitor's chair before my legs gave out. My wife faked her death to run away with her boss, left me to grieve for 2 years. And now you're here with their love child, expecting what, exactly? I need help, Vincent. I don't have anywhere else to go. Allergies. I looked at her. Really looked at her. Same face as Mel, but different. Softer somehow. Less calculating. Lucy had always been the gentle twin, according to the few stories Mel had shared. The one who rescued stray cats and cried at commercials. Why should I help you? You've been lying to me for 2 years. Because Mel screwed me over too, Lucy said, and for the first time, I heard real anger in her voice. She left me holding the bag, literally. I'm stuck with a baby I can't afford, in a city where I don't know anyone, pretending to be dead while she lives it up in Scandinavia. The still crying, and something in that sound got to me. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or the shock, or just the fact that I'd been alone for 2 years. And here was someone who needed help, even if she came with more baggage than a Kardashian vacation. Okay, I said, you can stay at my place, temporarily, until we figure this out. Wait, smiled, and for a moment, she looked so much like Mel that my chest ached. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, I said, standing up, because I'm going to find Mel, and when I do, I'm going to make her pay for what she did to both of us. Therefore, was my first mistake. I should have walked away right then, let Lucy figure out her own problems, and gone back to my quiet life of working double shifts and drinking beer in front of the TV. Instead, I decided to play hero. Heroes, as I was about to learn, usually end up getting hurt. 3 days later, I was sitting in Diesel's diner on East 9th Street, across from the only person in Cleveland who still took my calls. Dwayne Diesel Briggs had been my best friend since high school, back when we both thought we'd conquer the world instead of getting conquered by it. He'd made it through 20 years as a cop before taking early retirement and opening a diner that served the best pierogies this side of Parma. So let me get this straight, Diesel said, refilling my coffee cup with hands that had cuffed more criminals than I'd had hot dinners. Your dead wife isn't dead. She's shacked up with some doctor in Norway, and her twin sisters living in your house with their baby. That's about the size of it. And you want me to help you track down the wife so you can... What exactly? I stared into my coffee, watching the cream swirl like my thoughts. Make her pay. She took 2 years of my life, Diesel. 2 years I spent thinking I was a widower, working myself to death to pay off her medical bills and funeral expenses. Meanwhile, she's living the good life in some fjord, probably laughing about how she fooled the stupid steelworker. Diesel leaned back in his chair, studying me with cop eyes that had seen every kind of human wreckage. Vincent, revenge is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Trust me on this one. Easy for you to say. Your wife didn't fake her own death. No, she just divorced me and took half my pension. Sometimes I think your way might have been cleaner. Outside the diner, Cleveland was doing its usual impression of a city that had given up. Gray sky, gray buildings, gray people hurrying through gray slush. It matched my mood perfectly. I need to know how they pulled it off, I said. The death certificate, the insurance payout, all of it. Someone had to help them, and I want to know who. Pressured sighed, the sound of a man who'd heard this request too many times. I still got contacts at the department and the medical examiner's office. But Vincent, once you start pulling this thread, you can't unspool it. You sure you want to know what's at the end? I'm sure. The less, that was my second mistake. 2 hours later, I was back home. A modest 2-story in Tremont that Mel and I had bought when we still believed in things like forever and happily ever after. Lucy was in the kitchen, feeding the baby with a bottle while humming something that sounded like a lullaby. Any luck? She asked. Diesel's making some calls. We should know more by tomorrow. Lucy nodded, focusing on the baby with the kind of attention I used to reserve for complex machinery. The kid had stopped looking like an angry raisin and was starting to resemble an actual human being, which was progress. "Can I ask you something?" I said, settling into the chair across from her. "Shoot!" The doctor having their affair. Lucy's hand stopped moving, the bottle frozen halfway to the baby's mouth. "Vincent, I need to know. All of it." Sighed, the same sound Diesel had made earlier. Apparently, I was inspiring a lot of reluctant sighs these days. About a year before the accident. Maybe longer. I only found out because she called me one night, drunk and crying, saying she was in love with someone who wasn't you. Words hit like a punch to the solar plexus, but I kept my face neutral. 2 years of grieving had given me plenty of practice at hiding pain. Did everyone know? At the hospital? Yeah, pretty much. Mel wasn't exactly subtle about it. She'd work late with him, take long lunches, come back with that glow that married women aren't supposed to have unless they're with their husbands. And nobody thought to tell me? Would you have wanted to know? I indicted that. Would I have preferred to find out while Mel was alive, when I could have confronted her, fought for my marriage, or at least maintained some dignity in the divorce? Or was it better to learn the truth now, when she was safely thousands of miles away, and I could process the betrayal in private? "Yeah," I said finally. "I would have wanted to know." The baby finished the bottle and Lucy lifted it to her shoulder, patting its back with practiced motions. "Her name is Emma, by the way. Emma Pruitt. She has his last name?" Lucy nodded. Mel insisted. Said it would make things easier when they got married. "They're getting married?" "Were. Alex left his wife 6 months ago. Filed for divorce. Moved into some fancy condo downtown. But then," she gestured at Emma, "babies have a way of changing people's priorities." Something cold settled in my stomach. He doesn't want the kid. He wants Mel. The baby is complicated, especially now that I'm here, instead of safely dead in a grave somewhere. The phone rang, cutting through the domestic scene like a chainsaw through silk. I grabbed it on the second ring. "Vincent, it's Diesel. You need to get down here. Now." "What did you find?" "Not over the phone. Just get here." 20 minutes later, I was back in the diner, sitting across from Diesel and a thin man with nervous eyes and the pale complexion of someone who spent too much time with dead people. "Vincent, this is Jerry Kowalski. He works at the medical examiner's office." Jerry looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, which made two of us. He kept glancing at the door like he expected the police to burst in at any moment. "Jerry was on duty the night of Mel's accident," Diesel continued. "Tell him what you told me." Jerry cleared his throat. "The body that came in was pretty banged up. Car accidents, you know? Facial trauma, burns from the fire. But there were some things that didn't add up." "Like what?" "They matched, but..." Jerry paused, looking at Diesel for encouragement. "I've been doing this for 15 years. I know what switched dental records look like. Someone swapped the x-rays." My coffee turned to acid in my stomach. "Who?" "Had to be someone with access to both the hospital records and the ME's office. Someone with medical credentials and connections." "Dr. Pruitt. That'd be my guess. He had privileges at Cleveland General, knew the system, had the authority to request records for quality assurance reviews. So he switched the dental records to make Lucy's body match Mel's identity. That's what it looks like. But here's the thing. I kept copies of the original records. Call it professional paranoia, but something felt off, so I documented everything." Diesel slid a manila envelope across the table. "Jerry's willing to go on record, but he wants protection. If this comes out, he could lose his job, maybe face criminal charges for not reporting it sooner." I opened the envelope and found copies of dental x-rays, medical reports, and what looked like official correspondence between the ME's office and Cleveland General. It was all there in black and white. Proof that my wife and her lover had committed fraud, conspiracy, and God knew what else. "What do you want me to do with this?" I asked. "That's up to you," Diesel said. "But Jerry here thinks there might be more. Insurance fraud, falsified medical records, maybe even embezzlement. If Pruitt was willing to fake a death certificate, what else was he willing to fake?" I looked at Jerry, who was sweating despite the diner's air conditioning. You think there are other victims? Alex Pruitt is a man who's used to getting what he wants, and he's not too particular about how he gets it. Your wife might not be the first person he's helped disappear. That's when I realized this wasn't just about my marriage anymore. This was about justice, accountability, and making sure that bastards like Pruitt couldn't destroy lives without consequences. What's our next move? I asked. Diesel smiled, the predatory grin of a cop who just found a lead in a cold case. We're going hunting. The next morning, I called in sick to the mill for the first time in 3 years. My supervisor, Big Tony Kowalski, Jerry's cousin, as it turned out, Cleveland's a small town wearing a big city's clothes, didn't ask questions. He knew about Mel's death and probably figured I was having one of those days when grief hits you like a Louisville slugger to the kidneys. If only he knew. I spent the morning setting up surveillance on Dr. Alex Pruitt, which sounds more professional than it actually was. Mostly, it involved sitting in my rusted-out Chevy pickup across from Cleveland General's parking garage, drinking gas station coffee, and trying not to look like a stalker. Pruitt drove a silver BMW that cost more than I made in 2 years. He parked in a reserved spot near the executive entrance, walked with the confident stride of a man who'd never had to worry about mortgage payments, and wore suits that probably had their own insurance policies. I hated him on sight, which made the surveillance easier. It's hard to get bored when you're watching someone you'd like to feed into a wood chipper. At 11:30, he came out of the hospital with a woman I didn't recognize. She was younger than Mel, blonde, with the kind of figure that made men walk into lampposts. They got into his BMW and drove toward downtown. I followed at a distance, which was easier said than done in Cleveland traffic. My pickup had the stealth capabilities of a marching band, but Pruitt was too busy talking to his passenger to notice the rust bucket in his rearview mirror. They ended up at Morton's Steakhouse, the kind of place where the waiters wore bow ties, and the wine cost more per bottle than I spent on groceries in a month. I parked across the street and watched them through the restaurant's floor-to-ceiling windows. Pruitt was animated, gesturing with his hands while the blonde listened with the rapt attention of someone who was either deeply in love or professionally interested in his wallet. She laughed at his jokes, touched his arm, and generally acted like he was the most fascinating man on earth. Meanwhile, somewhere in Norway, Mel was probably wondering why her baby daddy wasn't returning her calls. I was so focused on the restaurant that I almost missed the tap on my passenger window. A Cleveland police cruiser had pulled up beside me, and Officer Patricia Kowalski, Jerry and Tony's cousin, I told you it was a small town, was looking at me with the expression cops reserve for suspicious characters and door-to-door salesmen. I rolled down the window. Hey, Patty. Vincent Mallory. Should have known. She was a compact woman with intelligent eyes and the no-nonsense attitude that ran in the Kowalski family. What are you doing sitting out here like a private detective with a drinking problem? Just having lunch. She looked at the empty coffee cups and fast food wrappers littering my dashboard. Uh-huh. And I suppose you're not watching the doctor in the fancy restaurant who's having an affair with someone who isn't your supposedly dead wife. I stared at her. How did you? Jerry talks to Tony, Tony talks to me, and I talk to Diesel. We're all worried about you, Vincent. This revenge thing you're planning? It's not going to end well. I'm not planning revenge. I'm gathering evidence. For what? Mel's been legally dead for 2 years. Even if you prove she's alive, what's the crime? Being married to an a-hole isn't against the law, or half the women in Cleveland would be in jail. She had a point, which annoyed me. Insurance fraud, falsifying medical records, conspiracy. You'd have to prove intent, and good luck with that. Mel could claim she was traumatized by the accident, confused about her identity, suffering from amnesia. Any halfway decent lawyer could get her off with community service and counseling. What about Pruitt? What about him? So he helped his girlfriend fake her death. Stupid? Yes. Romantic in a twisted way? Maybe. But unless you can prove he profited financially from the fraud, it's a misdemeanor at best. BMW was pulling out of the restaurant's parking lot. Pruitt and the blonde were laughing about something. Probably the poor bastard in the pickup truck who thought he was conducting surveillance. I have to go, I said. Patty grabbed my arm through the window. Vincent, listen to me. Whatever you're thinking of doing, don't. These people aren't worth destroying your life over. They already destroyed my life. No, they damaged it. There's a difference. You can recover from damage. Destruction is permanent. I pulled away from her grip and started the engine. Thanks for the advice, Patty. Give my regards to the family. I followed the BMW through downtown Cleveland, past the casino and the football stadium, into the warehouse district, where gentrification was slowly replacing urban decay with overpriced lofts and artisanal coffee shops. Pruitt's destination turned out to be a converted warehouse that had been transformed into luxury condominiums, the kind of place where young professionals paid $3,000 a month for the privilege of living in what used to be a factory. The blonde got out of the BMW and walked into the building like she owned it, which she probably did. Pruitt waited until she was inside, then made a phone call that lasted about 5 minutes. Even from across the street, I could see he was agitated, gesturing angrily at the windshield. When the call ended, he sat in his car for another 10 minutes, staring at his phone like it held the secrets of the universe. Then he drove away, tires squealing against the asphalt, with the sound of a man who had problems money couldn't solve. I followed him back to the hospital, where he disappeared into the building with the purposeful stride of someone who had serious business to conduct. I waited another hour, but he didn't come back out. That evening, I was sitting at my kitchen table, trying to make sense of what I'd seen, when Lucy came downstairs with Emma in her arms. "Any luck today?" she asked. "Your sister's boyfriend has a new girlfriend." Lucy wasn't surprised, which told me she knew more about Pruitt than she'd been letting on. "Blonde? About 25? Looks like she stepped out of a magazine. You know her? Stephanie something. She works at the hospital, in administration. Mel mentioned her once or twice, usually with words that would make a sailor blush. How long has this been going on?" Lucy settled into the chair across from me, shifting Emma to a more comfortable position. "Since about a month after Mel left for Norway. Alex doesn't handle loneliness well, apparently. Mel know? I don't know. We don't exactly keep in touch." I studied Lucy's for signs of deception. After 2 years of thinking she was dead, I'd become pretty good at reading people's expressions. Lucy was holding something back, but I couldn't tell what. "There's something you're not telling me," I said. She sighed. Everyone was sighing around me these days, and looked down at Emma. "Mel called me last week. She's coming back." The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. "What?" "She lost her job in Norway. Something about irregularities in her credentials, questions about her identity. The research facility terminated her contract and she's been ordered to leave the country." "When?" "Next week, maybe sooner." "She's scared, Vincent, really scared. She knows that coming back means facing the consequences of what she did." I felt something dark and cold spreading through my chest. 2 years of grief, anger, and betrayal were about to come face to face with the woman who'd caused it all. "Where is she going to stay?" She asked if she could come here. I told her no. Why? Let up at me with eyes that were identical to Mel's but somehow completely different. "Because you've been kinder to me in 1 week than she was in 37 years of being my sister. Because you deserved better than what she did to you. And because I think it's time someone stood up to Melanie Mallory and made her face the music." That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Emma cry in the room down the hall, and Lucy's gentle voice trying to soothe her. For 2 years, I dreamed of seeing Mel again, of having the chance to ask her why she'd left me, why she'd chosen someone else, why she'd let me believe she was dead. Now that dream was about to become reality, and I wasn't sure I was ready for it. But ready or not, Melanie Mallory was coming home, and I was going to be waiting for her. Mel arrived on a Tuesday morning in October, when the leaves were turning the color of dried rust, and the Lake Erie wind carried the promise of another brutal Cleveland winter. I knew she was coming because Diesel had contacts at the airport, and Diesel had contacts everywhere that mattered in this city. I was waiting in my pickup truck outside the arrivals terminal at Hopkins International, wearing my best jeans and a flannel shirt that had only 3 small holes in it. Call it vanity, but when you're about to confront your supposedly dead wife, you want to look like you've been doing okay without her, even if you haven't been. She came out of the terminal looking like 2 years in Norway had agreed with her. Same dark hair, but shorter now, styled in a way that probably cost more than my monthly electric bill. She wore clothes that screamed European sophistication, a long coat that looked like it was made from actual wool instead of polyester, boots that had never seen the inside of a Payless store, and sunglasses that could have doubled as a down payment on a car. She looked around the pickup area like she was expecting someone, which she probably was. Dr. Alex Pruitt was nowhere to be seen, which told me their relationship had hit some bumps while she was away. I got out of the truck and walked over to her. "Need a ride?" I asked. She turned toward my voice, and even through the sunglasses, I could see the shock on her face. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just stood there in the October wind, 2 people who used to share a bed and a life, and now shared nothing but a history of mutual destruction. "Hello, Vincent," she said finally. "Hello, Mel. You're looking good for a dead person." She took off the sunglasses, and I saw that her eyes were the same green I remembered, but harder now. 2 years of living a lie had left their mark. "I suppose you want an explanation." "I want a lot of things. An explanation would be a good start." She looked around the airport pickup area, where families were reuniting and taxi drivers were arguing over fares in 3 different languages. "Can we go somewhere private?" "My truck's private enough." We drove through Cleveland in silence, past the neighborhoods where we used to live and love, and pretend we had a future together. Mel stared out the window like she was seeing the city for the first time, which in a way, she was. When you fake your own death, you can't really come home again. "Where are we going?" she asked, as I turned onto East 9th Street. "Diesel's. He's got coffee and questions, and I figure you owe us both some answers." Diesel's diner was empty, except for a couple of regulars who came in every morning to complain about the weather and the Browns' latest losing streak. Diesel himself was behind the counter, polishing glasses with the methodical precision of a man who'd learned patience the hard way. "Well, well," he said when we walked in. "Look what the cat dragged in. Or should I say, look what the cat dragged back from the dead." Mel had the grace to look embarrassed, which was something. We sat in a booth near the back, where the lighting was dim enough to hide the worst of our expressions. "Coffee?" Diesel asked, already pouring 3 cups. "Please," Mel said, "and maybe something stronger. It's 9 in the morning. It's been a long 2 years. Sembled brought the coffee and sat down across from us, his cop eyes taking in every detail of Mel's appearance. "So, Melanie, heard you've been playing tourist in Norway while your husband here has been playing widower in Cleveland. It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "How was it supposed to happen?" I asked. "What was the plan, Mel? Run away with your boyfriend, let me think you were dead, and live happily ever after in the land of the midnight sun?" Shattered her hands around her coffee cup like it was an anchor in a storm. "Alex said we could start over somewhere new. No baggage, no complications, no messy divorce proceedings. Just a messy insurance fraud. That wasn't the plan. The accident was real, Vincent. Lucy was really hurt, really unconscious. When she woke up, everyone already thought she was me. It seemed like fate. Fate. I tasted the word like it was poison. You call destroying my life fate. I call it an opportunity, a chance for both of us to start fresh." Diesel leaned back in his chair, the springs creaking under his weight. "And how did that work out for you, sweetheart?" For the first time since she'd gotten off the plane, Mel looked vulnerable. The sophisticated European facade cracked, and I could see the woman I'd married underneath. Scared, desperate, and in way over her head. Alex changed his mind about the baby. Said he wasn't ready to be a father, that it would complicate things with his divorce. Then he met someone else, someone younger and less complicated. "Stephanie," I said. Mel's eyes flashed with anger. "You know about her?" I know about a lot of things, like how you and Alex falsified medical records, bribed officials, and committed insurance fraud. I know about the dental records that were switched, the death certificate that was forged, and the money that was paid out on a policy for someone who wasn't actually dead. The color drained from Mel's face. How did you? Turns out there are people in this city who don't like it when doctors think they're above the law. Diesel reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope thick with documents. We've got copies of everything, Mel. Medical records, insurance claims, bank statements showing money transfers between you and Pruitt. Enough evidence to put both of you away for a very long time. Mel stared at the envelope like it was a snake. What do you want? I said. I want you and your boyfriend to pay for what you did to me, to Lucy, to everyone who thought they were mourning a dead woman. And if I don't cooperate, then we take this to the police, the insurance company, the medical board, and anyone else who might be interested in how Dr. Alex Pruitt conducts his business. Mel was quiet for a long time, staring into her coffee like it held the answers to all her problems. When she finally looked up, her eyes were filled with something I'd never seen before. Genuine fear. What do you want me to do? I want you to help us destroy him, I said. I want you to give us everything you know about Pruitt's operation, his contacts, his methods. I want you to help us make sure he never does this to anyone else. And then you face the consequences of your choices, both of you. Mel closed her eyes, and for a moment, she looked like the woman I'd fallen in love with 15 years ago. Young, uncertain, human. Then she opened them, and the hardness was back. Okay, she said. I'll help you. But I want something in return. You're not exactly in a position to negotiate. I want to see Emma, my daughter. I exchanged glances. We'd expected this, but hearing it out loud still hit like a punch to the gut. She's not your daughter anymore, I said. You gave up that right when you decided to play dead. I'm her mother. Lucy's her mother. Lucy's the one who's been taking care of her, feeding her, changing her diapers, walking the floor with her at 3 a.m. You're just the woman who gave birth to her. Tears started running down Mel's cheeks, and I felt something twist in my chest. Despite everything she'd done, despite all the lies and betrayal, I still remembered loving this woman. I still remembered believing in her. Please, Vincent. I know I don't deserve it, but please, let me see my baby. I looked at Diesel, who shrugged. Your call, partner. 1 visit, I said finally. Supervised, and only after you give us everything we need to nail Pruitt to the wall. Nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, I said, standing up. Because once we start this, there's no going back. For any of us. As we left the diner, Diesel pulled me aside. You sure about this, Vincent? Once you light this fuse, the explosion's going to take out everyone in the blast radius. I'm sure. Even if it means destroying what's left of your marriage? At Mel, who was standing by my truck looking lost and alone in a city that used to be her home. Diesel, I said. My marriage died 2 years ago in a car wreck on Route 2. Everything since then has just been cleaning up the wreckage. That afternoon, we started planning the destruction of Dr. Alex Pruitt. And I discovered that revenge, like surgery, requires a steady hand and a sharp knife. The plan was simple, which made it beautiful. Mel would call Pruitt and arrange to meet him at his condo, claiming she needed to discuss their situation and the future of their relationship. She'd wear a wire, get him talking about the insurance fraud and falsified records, and give us everything we needed to destroy his career and his freedom. Simple plans, of course, have a way of becoming complicated when real people get involved. We spent 3 days preparing. Diesel used his contacts to get professional recording equipment, the kind that would hold up in court. Jerry Kowalski provided us with additional documentation from the medical examiner's office, including photographs and reports that clearly showed the discrepancies in the dental records. Lucy agreed to testify about her role in the deception, motivated partly by anger at Mel's abandonment and partly by a genuine desire to see justice done. She'd been living with the guilt of the fraud for 2 years, and the chance to come clean seemed to lift a weight from her shoulders. Mel, for her part, threw herself into the preparation with the intensity of someone who had nothing left to lose. She practiced her lines, memorized the technical details of the fraud, and steeled herself for what would essentially be the betrayal of her former lover. "Are you sure you can go through with this?" I asked her the night before the meeting. We were sitting in my living room, going over the plan one more time. Lucy was upstairs putting Emma to bed, and the house felt almost normal for a moment, like a family home, instead of a way station for damaged people. "I'm sure," Mel said. "Alex used me, Vincent. He promised me a new life, then threw me away when I became inconvenient. He deserves what's coming to him. And what about what you deserve?" She looked at me with those green eyes that had once been my whole world. "I deserve whatever punishment comes my way. I know that. But at least this way, some good might come from all the damage I've caused." The next evening, Mel walked into the lobby of Pruitt's luxury condo building, wearing a designer dress that had cost more than most people's monthly rent, and a wire that had cost Diesel 3 favors and a bottle of good whiskey. Diesel and I were parked across the street in an unmarked van he'd borrowed from a friend in the department, listening to every word through headphones that made us feel like federal agents, instead of a retired cop and a steelworker with revenge on their minds. "Alex?" Mel's voice came through clearly as she knocked on his door. "It's me, Melanie." Pruitt's voice was cool, controlled, with just a hint of annoyance. "I wasn't expecting you. We need to talk. I think we've said everything that needs to be said. I told you on the phone. It's over between us. I'm with Stephanie now. It's not about us, Alex. It's about Emma. And it's about the problems we're both going to have if certain information becomes public." There was a long pause, then the sound of a door opening. "Come in, but make it quick. Stephanie's coming over later." The condo was everything I'd expected from a man like Pruitt. Expensive furniture, abstract art that probably cost more than my house, and the kind of sterile perfection that screamed money but whispered loneliness. "Drink?" Pruitt asked. "Scotch, the good stuff." "You always did have expensive tastes. You used to like that about me. I used to like a lot of things about you, before you became complicated." Mel's laugh was bitter. "Complicated? Is that what you call having your baby?" "That baby was a mistake, Melanie. We both know it. Just like this whole Norway adventure was a mistake. The Norway adventure that you planned, the fake death that you orchestrated, the insurance money that you helped steal. The van, Diesel and I exchanged glances. Mel was pushing hard, maybe too hard. Pruitt was smart enough to know when he was being led into a trap. "I don't know what you're talking about," Pruitt said, his voice suddenly cautious. "Of course you do. The switched dental records, the forged death certificate, the payoff to Jerry Kowalski at the ME's office. Should I go on?" "You're wearing a wire." The words hit the headphones like a shockwave. In the van, Diesel was already reaching for his phone to call for backup. "Alex, don't be paranoid. Take off the dress." "What?" "You heard me. Take off the dress or this conversation is over." There was a long silence, filled with the sound of my heart hammering against my ribs. Then Mel's voice, steady and determined. "Fine, but you're going to listen to what I have to say first." "I'm listening." "Thefnes knows everything, Alex. He has copies of the medical records, the insurance documents, the bank transfers. He has testimony from Jerry Kowalski and Lucy. He has enough evidence to destroy both of us. So why are you here instead of in jail?" "Because he wants to make a deal. He wants you to confess publicly to the fraud. He wants you to take full responsibility and leave me out of it." "And why would I do that?" "Because if you don't, he's going to the police, the medical board, the insurance company, and every news outlet in Cleveland. Your career will be over, your reputation will be destroyed, and you'll spend the next 10 years in federal prison." Pruitt was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, harder, more dangerous. "You know what I think, Melanie? I think you're bluffing. I think Vincent Mallory is a broken-down steelworker who doesn't have the connections or the intelligence to pull off something like this. I think you're desperate and scared, and trying to con me into confessing to crimes that can't be proven. Alex, punished, and I think you're forgetting that I have just as much dirt on you as you have on me. Maybe more. After all, whose idea was it to fake your death in the first place? In the van, I felt something cold and sharp settle in my stomach. This wasn't going according to plan. It was your idea, Mel said, but her voice was less certain now. Was it? Because I remember a very different conversation. I remember you coming to me, crying about your loveless marriage, begging me to help you escape from your pathetic life. I remember you suggesting that Lucy's accident was an opportunity, a chance for you to disappear and start over. That's not how it happened, isn't it? And I remember you being very enthusiastic about the insurance money, very interested in making sure we got every penny we were entitled to. The wire went silent except for the sound of Mel's breathing, quick and shallow like a trapped animal. Here's what's going to happen, Pruitt continued. You're going to leave Cleveland and never come back. You're going to forget about Emma, forget about Vincent, and forget about me. And if you ever try to cause trouble for me again, I'll make sure everyone knows that the whole thing was your idea from the beginning. You bastard. I'm a bastard who's about to be very rich and very successful. You're a desperate woman with a history of fraud and a talent for making bad decisions. Who do you think people are going to believe? That's when I heard the sound that changed everything. The unmistakable click of a tool being cocked. Alex, what are you doing? Cleaning up loose ends. You should have stayed in Norway, Melanie. You should have been smart enough to know that coming back here would end badly for everyone involved. In the van, Diesel was already calling emergency, while I grabbed the crowbar we'd brought for emergencies. The plan had gone to heck, but I wasn't about to let Mel get ended by her psychopathic ex-lover, no matter what she'd done to me. The police are on their way, Diesel said as I jumped out of the van. Then they can arrest whoever's left alive, I said, and ran toward the building with the crowbar in my hand and 2 years of rage in my heart. Time to find out what revenge really cost. I took the stairs 3 at a time, my boots echoing in the stairwell like firecrackers. Behind me, I could hear Diesel huffing and puffing as he tried to keep up, cursing his retirement diet of pierogies and beer. The wire had gone dead after Pruitt's threat, which meant either Mel had found a way to remove it or something much worse had happened. Pruitt's condo was on the 8th floor, and by the time I reached it, my lungs were burning and my hands were shaking with adrenaline. I pressed my ear to the door and heard voices. Mel's high and frightened. Pruitt's calm and controlled, like a man discussing the weather instead of homicide. You always were dramatic, Melanie. Do you really think I'm going to shoot you in my own home? Think of the mess, the questions, the inconvenience. Then what are you going to do? I'm going to give you a choice. You can walk out of here, disappear again, and live with the knowledge that you destroyed your marriage and abandoned your daughter for nothing. Or you can keep making threats and find out just how creative I can be when it comes to solving problems. Willingness. I tried the door handle. Locked, naturally. The crowbar would make too much noise, and by the time I broke through, Pruitt could have done whatever he was planning to do. I needed a different approach. That's when I remembered the building's layout. Luxury condos like this one always had balconies, and balconies meant access from the outside for anyone stupid enough to try it. 8 floors up, in October, with Lake Erie wind trying to turn me into street pizza. But I'd worked construction before the mill job. I knew how to climb, how to balance, how to ignore the voice in my head that kept pointing out all the ways this could go wrong. The building's facade was modern brick, with decorative ledges every 2 floors. Just enough to provide handholds for someone with more desperation than sense. I went back down to the 6th floor, found an unlocked window in the stairwell, and climbed out into the Cleveland night. The wind hit me like a physical blow, carrying the smell of the lake and the promise of an early winter. 8 stories below, traffic moved through the streets like life cells through arteries, completely unaware that a middle-aged steelworker was about to attempt something that would either save his ex-wife's life or provide the evening news with a spectacular story about stupidity and gravity. The climb to the 8th floor took forever and no time at all. My fingers were numb by the time I reached Pruitt's balcony, and my legs were shaking from more than just the cold. But I was there, crouched behind a decorative planter, looking through sliding glass doors into a scene that made my chest freeze. Mel was sitting in a chair in the middle of the living room, her hands zip-tied behind her back. The wire she'd been wearing was on the coffee table, along with what looked like a syringe and a small bottle of clear liquid. Pruitt was standing beside her, no longer the smooth professional I'd been watching for weeks. His hair was disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled, and his eyes had the flat, dead look of a man who'd crossed a line and found he liked the view from the other side. Insulin, he was saying, holding up the syringe. Amazing stuff. In the right dose, it regulates sugar levels and saves lives. In the wrong dose, it causes hypoglycemic shock, coma, and death. And the best part? It's almost impossible to detect in an autopsy, unless you know exactly what to look for. Alex, please. Think about what you're doing. I am thinking. I'm thinking about my career, my reputation, my future with Stephanie. I'm thinking about how much simpler my life will be without you in it. People will ask questions. Vincent knows I'm here. Rendering. Vincent knows you came to see me. He doesn't know you left. As far as anyone can prove, you walked out of here alive and disappeared again. Another tragic case of a disturbed woman who couldn't handle the consequences of her actions. Shocks. That's when I stopped thinking and started moving. The sliding door was unlocked, Pruitt's arrogance working in my favor. I slipped inside as quietly as I could, but the man had good hearing. "Hello, Vincent," he said without turning around. "I was wondering when you'd make your dramatic entrance." Nelson. "Let her go, Pruitt." "Or what? You'll beat me to death with that crowbar?" "I don't think so. You're not a butcher, Vincent. You're a working-class hero with a conscience and a code of ethics. You might rough me up a little, but you won't cross the line into homicide." He was right, which was the heck of it. I wanted to cave in his skull, wanted to make him pay for every lie, every betrayal, every moment of pain he'd caused. But I wasn't a butcher, and we both knew it. "The police are on their way," I said. "Are they? How unfortunate. I suppose I'll have to work quickly." He raised the syringe, and that's when Mel did something I never expected. She threw herself sideways, chair and all, knocking into Pruitt's legs and sending him stumbling backward. The syringe went flying, and I was moving before it hit the ground. Pruitt was bigger than me, younger than me, and in better shape than me. But I had 2 years of rage and a crowbar, which evened the odds considerably. The fight was brief and ugly. Pruitt tried to get to the syringe. I tried to stop him, and furniture got destroyed in the process. He was fast and desperate, but I was desperate and angry, which turned out to be a better combination. When it was over, Pruitt was on the floor with a broken nose and a concussion, and I was standing over him with bruised knuckles, and the kind of satisfaction that comes from finally hitting back at the world. "Vincent." Mel's voice was weak but steady. "The zip ties." Cut her loose with a kitchen knife, my hands shaking from adrenaline and relief. She rubbed her wrists where the plastic had cut into her skin, then looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," she said. I was entirely. "Thank you. That isn't over." That's when the police arrived, along with the paramedics, the fire department, and what looked like half the news crews in Cleveland. Diesel had called in every favor he was owed, and the cavalry had arrived in force. The next few hours were a blur of statements, evidence collection, and medical examinations. Pruitt was arrested on charges of attempted homicide, insurance fraud, and conspiracy. The syringe tested positive for insulin, and the recording equipment in the van had captured enough of his confession to ensure he'd be spending the next decade or two in a place where expensive suits and medical degrees didn't mean much. Mel was also arrested, but her cooperation with the investigation and her status as a victim of Pruitt's violence meant she'd likely face minimal jail time. The insurance company would want their money back, and she'd probably never work in the medical field again. But she'd live to see Emma grow up. Which brought us to the final confrontation, the one I'd been dreading since this whole mess began. We were sitting in an interview room at the police station, waiting for the lawyers to finish their paperwork. Mel looked exhausted, older than her years, but somehow more real than she'd seemed in years. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you face the consequences of your choices. We both do." I meant with us, with Emma. I looked at her for a long time. This woman who'd been my wife, my love, my greatest mistake. "There is no us, Mel. There hasn't been for 2 years. As for Emma, that's between you and Lucy. She's my Lucy's daughter. You gave birth to her, but Lucy raised her. Biology doesn't make you a mother, Mel. Love does. Sacrifice does. Being there at 3 in the morning when she's crying does." Tears started running down her face again, but I felt nothing. The man who'd loved Melanie Mallory had died 2 years ago in a car wreck on Route 2. I was someone else now, someone harder and colder and infinitely more careful about who he trusted. "I'm sorry, Vincent, for everything. I know it doesn't change anything, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. I know you are. But sorry doesn't give me back 2 years of my life. Sorry doesn't undo the damage you did to Lucy, to Emma, to everyone who mourned you. Sorry is just a word, Mel. It's what you do after you say it that matters." She nodded, that whatever we'd once meant to each other was over now. "What will you do?" "I'll go back to work. I'll help Lucy raise Emma if she'll let me. I'll try to build something good out of all this wreckage." "And me?" I stood up, suddenly exhausted by the weight of everything that had happened. "You'll do whatever you do, Mel, but you'll do it somewhere else, with someone else. We're done." 3 months later, I was sitting in Diesel's diner, reading the newspaper and drinking coffee that could strip paint. The headline read, "Prominent doctor sentenced to 15 years in insurance fraud case." Penguins had pled guilty to avoid a homicide charge, but 15 years was long enough to ensure he'd never practice medicine again. His medical license had been revoked, his assets seized to pay restitution, and his reputation destroyed so thoroughly that he'd probably have trouble getting a job selling used cars when he got out. Mel had received 2 years probation and community service, along with a court order requiring her to pay back the insurance money. She'd moved to Florida, where she was working as a medical technician under her real name and trying to rebuild her life from scratch. Lucy and Emma were living in my house, which had become a real home for the first time in years. Lucy had gotten a job at a software company downtown, and Emma was growing into a happy, healthy baby who would never know how complicated her first few months of life had been. "Any regrets?" Diesel asked, refilling my cup. I thought about it. Really thought about it. 2 years of my life had been stolen. My marriage had been destroyed, and I'd learned that the woman I'd loved was capable of betrayal I'd never imagined. But I'd also learned that I was stronger than I'd thought, that justice was possible even when the system seemed rigged, and that family wasn't always about biology. "No," I said finally. "No regrets. Even about Mel? Especially about Mel. She made her choice, and I made mine. She chose to fake her death and run away. I chose to fight back and make her face the consequences. I can live with my choice." Nodded, understanding that some conversations don't need to be finished with words. Outside the diner, Cleveland was doing its usual impression of a city that refused to give up. And I was part of that now. Scarred, but not broken. Damaged, but not destroyed. That evening, I went home to Lucy and Emma, to a house filled with the sounds of real life, instead of the silence of grief. Lucy was in the kitchen, making dinner and humming something that sounded like happiness. Emma was in her high chair, making the kind of mess that only babies can make and somehow making it look adorable. "How was your day?" Lucy asked, kissing my cheek like we were a real family, instead of 3 people who'd found each other in the wreckage of someone else's lies. "Good," I said, picking up Emma and getting baby food in my hair. "Really good." And for the first time in 2 years, I meant it. Melanie Mallory had tried to destroy my life, but she'd failed. I was still here, still standing, still capable of love and trust and hope. She'd left me for dead, but I'd survived. And that, I thought, was the best revenge of all.